Alrighty, lads, we are back. This time with some lore on my own book, Lord of Gallows. So, what the fuck is the Robus? Another faction on the island of Doldura. So, let's talk about them. They're extremely strong. Like, extremely. That's their whole motto, that's their whole way of life, is strength. Might makes right in their society. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. As it stands, the Robus inhabit the mines of the island. The mines is talked about in the latest chapter I uploaded, chapter 6 and chapter 5. But the mines are inside the giant volcano mountain that is in the center of Doldura. And inside there is just ores and minerals of unknown proportion. It is just limitless ore of copper, iron, any metal is just getting pumped out. And the Robus own this area, which makes them arguably the wealthiest, as they have the best land for material, but unfortunately that doesn't make them the strongest faction in the world, as there are some limitations to their faction. You see, despite owning everything, they don't really have the knack for it. They don't have the intelligence to use their materials wisely. They are, of course, probably around your average intelligence, but the thing is with the Robus is that they're too busy pumping themselves full of chemicals that are being made by their chemists. And you see, this is kind of the interesting thing. The Jewel is kind of like the science faction. They're all about science, they're all about these crazy technologies that they have, whereas the Robus is very simple-minded. They focus on just one aspect of science, which is augmentation. This could be exosuits, so very, very primitive looking exosuits where they have some very archaic looking power armor, where it literally just looks like just giant metal slabs just slapped onto them. And then it comes down to their chemists, which is really what the Robus is known for, and this is really their wealth, is their genetic manipulations. You see, they don't understand DNA quite as much as you and I, but they understand it enough to augment themselves with drugs that are just super over the top. Some of these give them human growth hormones, which is why some of them have massive muscles at uncontrolled rates. Some of them opt for other augmentations, like maybe they may opt for thicker bone density. So it's not that they're strong because they have massive muscles. No, they're strong because their bones are delivering shocking stopping power every time they hit you with it. There is, of course, some interesting things about the Robus that I am going to dive into in the book later on. But the Robus is exactly the opposite of the Jewel. You see, the Jewel adhere to intelligence. They find intelligence as the greatest trait you can ever have. If you're intelligent, you're going to climb really far in their ranks. The Robus, on the other hand, they are the adherents of might makes right. So they're looking for the strongest people to join their faction. Those who are augmented with amazing capabilities to withstand cannon shots to the chest. Those who are able to just crush an actual copper cannon with their bare hands and just stick it up someone's ass. This is what the Robus look for. And it's very interesting between the two factions, as you have the Jewel, who, as I stated before, they adhere to intelligence. They want people who are smart. But they can't exist without your day-to-day average strongman to lift up their laboratory gear, to put their materials in place. And then you got the Robus, who are the exact opposite. They adhere to strength. All they want is the strongest guys in the world to join their fight. And yet they rely a lot on intelligence. They rely a lot on their chemists. There are guys who are just sitting there making these huge vats of chemicals. They rely a lot on those guys. So while they may adhere to strength, they really rely on their intelligence. And while the Jewel may act as though they're relying on their intelligence, they're actually relying on their strongmen, because they need strongmen to lift up their gear, put this heavy materials that they're using to study in their heavy fucking weapons, which are these massive copper cannons. They're not going to be able to push that. They need strongmen to do it. So it's this very interesting dilemma between the two factions that I like so much, where one is just extremely strong and one is extremely intelligent, but honestly, when you look at their inner workings of their society, one needs intelligence and one needs strength. Now, despite that, the average daily life of living under Robus rule is actually not that bad, because they are the working Joes. They're the guys who are going to be down in the mines with you, working hard, toiling away at the hard rock, draining up that liquid iron into the pipes. They're the guys who are going to be helping you with your job. Now, that being said, while they do have a nice camaraderie with their citizens, they are not exactly friends with their citizens, because there is the downside to their mutations. By purposely inducing themselves with these chemicals, it does make it where they have moments of lapse of judgment. There's really no other way for me to say it, but they actually do go berserk at times. And when they go berserk, they go around looking for fights. Now, if you're the average citizen who gets caught in their way, you will get squashed and you will get absolutely pummeled. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do about it. But thankfully, the Robus are kind-hearted enough because, as I said, they work side by side with their citizens, that they actually will compensate whoever's the victim, whoever the victim's family is. They will receive a little compensation, which is enough to get you by for a week without having to work, which obviously isn't much. That's like a few coins at best. But they're the only faction that's actually displayed any sort of compassion. And it's very odd when you see them because they don't really look like the compassionate types. Super fucking hulking guys, huge as hell, able to easily squash someone. And they're always flaunting about their strength and trying to be as violent as they can be towards one another so they can climb their own hierarchy, their own ladder. But then when it comes to the average people, they're very compassionate. Hey, sorry I killed your uncle. Here you go. This is 100 coins. That should get you through the week. The leader of the Robus, though, is known as Iron Mass. Iron Mass is new. He's actually the new blood in the Robus. He stands easily 9 feet tall. Dude is huge. To put it bluntly, he is massive. He's just this huge muscle-bound dude. Think of kind of like the tank from Left 4 Dead. This guy is amazingly ripped with muscles, thanks to extreme augmentation. Now, interestingly enough, he has a mutation from growing up in the mines. He has a very rare genetic deformity where iron builds up too much in his blood, and it makes it where some of his muscles are actually streaks of iron. This, of course, has actually helped him quite a bit, as there is laces of metal throughout his bones, throughout his body, throughout his very organs. There is actually metal laced around in these thin, thin layers. This bolsters his strength, bolsters his toughness. It makes him extremely tough to kill. There have been many people who've blasted cannons on him and haven't even bruised his skin. It is extremely scary to see whenever he decides to go into berserk mode. That being said, the last time people have seen him fought, he actually destroyed a ship by just punching it in the bow. Just boom! Punched it and the ship just split into two. This guy is not to mess around with. But many of the Robus adhere to his unique metal mutation, and this is why they try to go into the mines without proper facial mask. You see, they're trying to inhale the vapors of the metal to purposely get some sort of mutation like that where metal starts to form around their skin. Unfortunately for them, it just makes them dumber and it makes their lungs extremely weak. That's usually the telltale sign that someone is a Robus, is not only are they huge and muscular, but they may have a cough. They may actually have really, really bad respiratory diseases. They may have rust in their lungs, which is very scary indeed. This is why someone who's a Robus, initially, before they inhabited the mines, they owned the town that the Hookbloods took over. Those Robuses were able to breathe really easily. They weren't quite as muscular, and they weren't quite as, I would say, violent. But they were more or less more capable. They were able to breathe better. They were able to run farther. The new Robuses are a lot stronger and a lot tougher, a lot more violent, but they still have these respiratory illnesses because they're purposely not wearing protective gear when they're inside the mines, inhaling these nasty, nasty vapors, trying to become like their new leader, Iron Mass. Usually when it comes to fighting, though, the Robus rely on melee. If they are not in the melee, they do have some cannons, they do have weapons. The only issue is that they have to have them specially modified to fit their massive muscular hands. You see, those who are in the lower echelons of the Robus, they're pretty much like you and I. They're very normal. They just may be muscular, a little bit bulkier than you and I. They could use a regular gun, no problem. But those in the higher echelons, those near the top, they are so muscle-bound that they are unable to wield things like swords, guns, so they have to make up for it. Now, when it came to Iron Mass, he's went around it pretty simply. He just dons on a pair of metal gloves. I'm not joking. He will actually have this huge, almost like boxing gloves, but they're made of just pure, thick steel. And it costs him quite a pretty penny to get that much steel. Usually people settle for iron, but nope. When you're this rich, you gotta go steel, baby. Now, he has no range capabilities, unfortunately, but this is mostly due to the fact that there's no realistic way for him to fire a gun. So instead what he does is he has to close the distance in combat. So in order for Iron Mass to close the distance between him and his target, he has 2 short cannons strapped to the lower back of his body. And what happens here is by just flicking his steel gloves back, he's able to start a spark, as around his belly he carries a bunch of flint pads. Now the whole point of flint pads is for his steel gloves to spark it, and that causes it where the cannons behind him are going to fire. Now when they fire, he tries to time it perfectly where he jumps up, boom, and it gives him enough push to send him high up in the air to land on his target. This is the ideal situation. Of course, it doesn't work all the time for him. After all, he could stand there flicking the flint pads as many times as he can to finally get a spark going. But, hey, might makes right, and he does get the job done rather brutally. If he doesn't get a spark going to get there, he'll just run to you anyways and just blow your head off with his own fists. After all, he's resistant to cannon fire. The only time someone's actually hurt Iron Mass was when he was fighting in a bare-knuckle fight with the previous leader, where it seemed like the previous leader actually dented some of the metal muscular fibers in his body from punching him so hard. So, being slow but extremely impervious to pain, Iron Mass seems to be like he's going to stay the leader of the Robus for a very long time. Besides that, this has been Freezer700. I am out. I hope you guys enjoy reading the books. Chapter 6 came out at the moment that this video got released. And I just hope that you guys enjoy looking into some of these crazy factions and seeing how they develop.